Question 1. The assessment process reveals that a development team is working on a new module for IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. One that will process sensitive customer information. The team is considering several methods to handle this data during development and testing phases to ensure compliance and prevent breaches. Which of the following approaches best aligns with IBM TRIRIGA v3? 2. 1. Development guidelines and data protection best practices for handling sensitive data in a non-production environment. Option A. Implement data masking or anonymization techniques directly within the TRIRIGA application's data structures and business logic for development and testing environments. Option B. Use generic placeholder text and random characters that do not resemble actual customer data formats for all sensitive fields. Option C. Remove all sensitive customer data from the development and testing environments entirely, without any form of substitution or anonymization. Option D. Rely solely on network-level firewalls and access controls to restrict access to the development and testing servers, where the sensitive data resides. Correct answer is A. Implement data masking or anonymization techniques directly within the TRIRIGA application's data structures and business logic for development and testing environments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient data management with the imperative to comply with data privacy regulations. Developers must understand how to implement data handling strategies that are both functional within the TRIRIGA platform and legally sound. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying specific IBM TRIRIGA v3. 2. 1. Development guidelines in conjunction with broader data protection principles, ensuring that sensitive information is not inadvertently exposed or misused. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging TRIRIGA built-in security features and best practices for data masking or anonymization at the application level. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and privacy by default, which are fundamental to data protection regulations. By implementing these measures within the TRIRIGA application development framework, developers ensure that data is protected at its source, minimizing the risk of unauthorized access or disclosure during development, testing, or even in production environments where access might be restricted. This proactive approach is the most robust and professionally responsible method for handling sensitive data in a development context. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to rely solely on external network security or access controls to protect sensitive data within the development environment. This fails to address the inherent risk of data exposure within the application itself. If the application logic or data structures are not designed with privacy in mind, even secure network access can be circumvented by malicious actors or accidental misconfigurations within the TRIRIGA application. This approach violates the principle of data minimization and fails to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures as required by data protection frameworks. Another incorrect approach would be to simply remove all sensitive data from the development and testing environments without any form of substitution or anonymization. While this might seem like a straightforward way to avoid data breaches, it severely hampers the ability to accurately test application functionality, especially features that rely on realistic data scenarios. This can lead to the deployment of applications with untested data handling capabilities, potentially causing compliance issues or functional failures in production. It also fails to adhere to the spirit of developing robust and secure applications that can handle real-world data responsibly. A third incorrect approach would be to use placeholder data that is not representative of actual data formats or characteristics. This can lead to incorrect assumptions about data behavior and may result in the application failing to handle real-world data correctly, particularly concerning data validation, storage, and retrieval. This approach undermines the integrity of the testing process and can lead to the development of applications that are not fit for purpose, potentially leading to data integrity issues and subsequent compliance risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing data protection from the initial stages of development. This involves understanding the data being handled, identifying potential risks, and implementing appropriate technical and organizational controls within the TRIRIGA application. Consulting IBM TRIRIGA v3. 2. 1. Development documentation for security best practices and adhering to general data privacy principles are crucial. When in doubt, seeking guidance from data privacy experts or legal counsel is a sign of professional diligence. The goal is to build secure and compliant applications that protect sensitive information throughout its lifecycle. Question 2. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential performance degradation issue with a custom business process component developed for IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. This component is critical for a core operational workflow. What is the most appropriate next step to address this identified risk? Option A. Conduct a detailed code review of the custom component. Analyze its integration points with other TRIRIGA modules, and assess its adherence to IBM TRIRIGA v3. 2. 1. Development best practices and internal governance standards to identify the root cause and propose a compliant remediation. Option B. Immediately implement a temporary workaround by modifying related configuration settings to bypass the affected component, deferring a full investigation until a later, less critical period. Option C. Disable the custom component entirely to prevent further performance issues and inform the business users that the functionality will be unavailable until a long-term solution can be determined. Option D. Initiate a complete rewrite of the custom component using the latest development paradigms, assuming the existing code is outdated and the most efficient solution is a fresh implementation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed code review of the custom component, analyze its integration points with other TRIRIGA modules, and assess its adherence to IBM TRIRIGA v3. 2. 1. Development best practices and internal governance standards to identify the root cause and propose a compliant remediation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in application development where a critical business process relies on a custom-built component. The challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate functionality with the long-term maintainability and compliance of the solution. The risk assessment highlights a potential vulnerability, demanding a proactive and informed response that adheres to established development and governance principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation of the existing custom code, its integration points, and its adherence to IBM TRIRIGA v3. 2. 1. Development standards and any applicable internal governance policies. This includes reviewing the code for potential performance bottlenecks, security vulnerabilities, and deviations from best practices. The goal is to understand the root cause of the identified risk and to develop a solution that is not only effective, but also sustainable and compliant. This aligns with the principles of robust application development and risk management, ensuring that the solution remains supportable and does not introduce future compliance issues. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately deploy a workaround without fully understanding the custom code's impact. This bypasses essential due diligence, potentially masking underlying issues and creating technical debt. It fails to address the root cause of the risk, which is a violation of sound development practices, and could lead to unforeseen consequences and future compliance breaches. Another incorrect approach would be to simply disable the functionality without proper impact analysis. This could disrupt critical business operations and is a reactive measure that does not solve the underlying problem. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to finding a sustainable solution and could lead to operational inefficiencies, which indirectly impacts compliance with business process integrity. A third incorrect approach would be to rewrite the entire component from scratch without a clear understanding of the original intent or the specific risk identified. This is an inefficient use of resources and may introduce new, unknown risks. It fails to leverage existing knowledge and could lead to a solution that is over-engineered or does not directly address the identified risk, thus not being a professional or compliant response. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first gathering all relevant information about the identified risk. This involves understanding the business context, the technical implementation, and any associated documentation. A structured problem-solving methodology, such as root cause analysis, should be employed. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that are compliant with IBM TRIRIGA v3. 2. 1. Development guidelines, internal policies, and any relevant regulatory frameworks. Collaboration with stakeholders, including business users and IT governance teams, is crucial to ensure that the chosen solution meets both functional and non-functional requirements while mitigating risks effectively. Question 3. Operational review demonstrates that a team of financial analysts requires access to sensitive project budget data within IBM TRIRIGA to perform their daily tasks. However, the current security configuration grants these analysts access to all financial modules, including historical expenditure records and vendor payment details, which are not directly relevant to their immediate budget analysis responsibilities. What is the most appropriate course of action to enhance data security and compliance? Option A. Implement granular security roles within TRIRIGA that grant the financial analysts access only to the specific project budget data fields and functionalities required for their analysis, while restricting access to other sensitive financial modules. Option B. Rely on existing network-level security controls to protect the sensitive financial data, as the TRIRIGA application itself is hosted on a secure network. Option C. Provide the financial analysts with read-only access to all financial modules to ensure they can view any relevant data, assuming their roles are trustworthy. Option D. Disable auditing for all financial data transactions to reduce system load and improve performance, as the analysts are trusted personnel. The correct answer is A. Implement granular security roles within TRIRIGA that grant the financial analysts access only to the specific project budget data fields and functionalities required for their analysis, while restricting access to other sensitive financial modules. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data security and access control within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform, specifically concerning the management of sensitive financial data. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for authorized personnel to access and process this data with the imperative to prevent unauthorized disclosure or modification, adhering to IBM TRIRIGA security best practices and relevant data privacy regulations. The correct approach involves implementing granular security roles and permissions within TRIRIGA that strictly align with the principle of least privilege. This ensures that users only have access to the specific data and functionalities necessary for their job roles, thereby minimizing the risk of data breaches or misuse. This aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation of safeguarding sensitive information and maintaining data integrity, which is a cornerstone of responsible application development and data management. Incorrect approach would be to grant broad access to financial data to a wider group of users than strictly necessary, even if they are considered trusted. This violates the principle of least privilege and significantly increases the attack surface for potential data breaches. Ethically and regulatorily, this demonstrates a failure to implement adequate controls for sensitive data, potentially leading to noncompliance with data protection laws and a breach of trust. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on external network security measures without configuring specific access controls within TRIRIGA. Network security is important. It is insufficient on its own to protect sensitive data from internal threats or compromised credentials. This approach fails to address the application-level security requirements and leaves the sensitive data vulnerable to unauthorized access by individuals who may have legitimate network access, but no business need for the financial data. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical oversight in data governance. A third incorrect approach would be to disable auditing for financial data transactions to reduce system load. Auditing is a critical control mechanism for detecting and investigating unauthorized access or modifications. Disabling it creates a blind spot, making it impossible to identify who accessed or altered sensitive data, thus hindering any potential forensic investigation and demonstrating a disregard for accountability and data integrity. This is a direct contravention of best practices for data security and compliance. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a thorough risk assessment of data access requirements, a clear understanding of the principle of least privilege, and the implementation of robust, role-based security configurations within the TRIRIGA platform. Developers must prioritize security by design and ensure that all access controls are documented, tested, and regularly reviewed to maintain compliance with internal policies and external regulations. Question 4. Process analysis reveals that a new module is being developed for the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. To manage environmental compliance reporting. The development team is under pressure to deliver this module quickly to meet a critical regulatory deadline. Which of the following approaches best ensures adherence to the regulatory framework governing this development, considering the need for both speed and compliance? Option A. Rely on the inherent compliance features of the TRIRIGA platform without specific validation, as the platform is generally designed to support regulatory adherence. Option B. Develop the module using standard TRIRIGA functionalities and document the configuration post-development, assuming it meets all reporting requirements. Option C. Integrate compliance requirements into the module's design and development phases. Conduct regular compliance reviews with subject matter experts, and ensure comprehensive documentation of all compliance-related configurations and processes throughout the lifecycle. Option D. Prioritize rapid feature deployment, deferring detailed compliance validation and documentation until after the initial release, with plans for a subsequent compliance patch. Correct answer is B. Develop the module using standard TRIRIGA functionalities and document the configuration post-development, assuming it meets all reporting requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in ensuring regulatory compliance within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform development lifecycle. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient development and feature delivery with the stringent requirements of regulatory frameworks, specifically those applicable to the exam's jurisdiction. Developers must proactively identify and integrate compliance measures without compromising the platform's functionality or performance. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to shortcuts that inadvertently introduce compliance risks. Making careful judgment and a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy for regulatory compliance. This means embedding compliance checks and considerations directly into the development process from the outset. For the C2010-597 IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3, 2.1 application development exam. This translates to understanding how the platform's features and configurations can be used to meet specific regulatory mandates. This includes leveraging TRIRIGA built-in functionalities for data governance, audit trails, and access controls, and ensuring that custom development adheres to established compliance patterns. By conducting regular compliance reviews and incorporating feedback from compliance officers or subject matter experts throughout the development lifecycle, potential issues are identified and rectified early, minimizing the risk of non-compliance and costly remediation efforts. This approach aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing risk mitigation and demonstrating due diligence in adhering to the specified regulatory framework. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves a reactive stance, where compliance is only considered after a feature has been developed or, worse, after an audit has been conducted. This leads to significant rework, delays, and potential penalties. It fails to meet regulatory requirements by treating compliance as an afterthought rather than an integral part of the development process. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of responsibility and foresight. Another incorrect approach is to assume that standard TRIRIGA configurations are inherently compliant without specific validation against the relevant regulatory framework. This overlooks the nuances of how specific business processes and data are handled within the platform, which can create compliance gaps. This approach is professionally negligent, as it relies on assumptions rather than verified adherence to the law. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize feature development over compliance documentation. While TRIRIGA offers tools for managing compliance, failing to properly document how these tools are configured and used for specific regulatory purposes leaves the organization vulnerable during audits. This lack of transparency and auditable evidence is a direct violation of many regulatory principles that emphasize accountability and traceability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to regulatory compliance in application development. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory framework applicable to the jurisdiction and the TRIRIGA platform's use case. 2. Identifying potential compliance risks associated with proposed features and configurations. 3. Integrating compliance requirements into the design and development phases. 4. Implementing robust testing and validation procedures that specifically address compliance. 5. Maintaining comprehensive and up-to-date documentation of compliance measures. 6. Engaging with compliance stakeholders throughout the project lifecycle. 7. Continuously monitoring for changes in regulatory requirements and updating practices accordingly. Question 5. The assessment process reveals that a development team is implementing a new module within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. To manage employee onboarding data, which includes personally identifiable information, PI, and potentially sensitive HR details. The team is under pressure to deploy this module quickly to meet business needs. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance with U.S. federal data privacy and security regulations while facilitating timely deployment? Option A. Implement the module with standard TRIRIGA security settings and assume that the platform's inherent security features are sufficient for regulatory compliance, deferring detailed compliance review until after deployment. Option B. Focus solely on meeting the functional requirements of the onboarding module, relying on the IT department's general security policies to cover any regulatory compliance aspects and address any compliance concerns that arise post-deployment. Option C. Utilize third-party pre-built TRIRIGA extensions that claim to be compliant with general data protection standards, without performing an independent assessment of their suitability for the specific U.S. federal regulations applicable to the organization's PII handling. Option D. Develop the module, conduct a comprehensive data privacy and security impact assessment specifically for the new module's data handling and processing activities. Document all compliance-related configurations and data flows, and integrate compliance validation checkpoints throughout the development lifecycle. The correct answer is A. Implement the module with standard TRIRIGA security settings and assume that the platform's inherent security features are sufficient for regulatory compliance, deferring detailed compliance review until after deployment. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in regulatory compliance within application development, balancing the need for rapid deployment with the imperative to adhere to data privacy and security regulations. In the context of IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. This often involves handling sensitive facility management or financial data. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that all custom configurations, integrations, and data handling practices within TRIRIGA align with the specified regulatory framework, which for this exam is assumed to be U.S. federal regulations pertaining to data privacy and security, e.g., HIPAA, GDPR if applicable to U.S. operations, or other relevant U.S. standards. A developer must not only understand the TRIRIGA platform's capabilities, but also how its implementation impacts compliance. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and documented strategy for regulatory compliance. This involves integrating compliance checks into the development lifecycle, conducting thorough impact assessments for any changes, and maintaining detailed audit trails. By prioritizing a privacy by design and security by design philosophy, developers ensure that compliance is not an afterthought but a foundational element of the application's architecture and functionality. This aligns with best professional practices by minimizing risk, ensuring data integrity, and building trust with stakeholders and end users. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical development and responsible data stewardship, which are paramount in regulated environments. Incorrect approaches often stem from a reactive stance or a misunderstanding of the regulatory scope. One incorrect approach might involve assuming that standard TRIRIGA configurations are inherently compliant without specific validation for the organization's unique data processing activities. This fails to acknowledge that custom development or specific data usage patterns can introduce compliance gaps. A regulatory failure here would be the potential for unauthorized access, disclosure, or misuse of sensitive data, leading to significant fines, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach could be to defer compliance validation to the end of the project, which is inefficient and increases the risk of costly rework. This violates the principle of integrating compliance throughout the development process and can lead to missed deadlines and budget overruns, as well as potential noncompliance. A third incorrect approach might be to rely solely on IT security measures without considering the broader regulatory requirements for data handling, consent, or reporting, which are often distinct from technical security controls. This oversight can lead to breaches of specific regulatory mandates, even if the system is technically secure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Understand the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the data being processed and the organization's operations. 2. Conduct a thorough risk assessment for all development activities, identifying potential compliance vulnerabilities. 3. Integrate compliance considerations into the design and development phases, employing by design principles. 4. Document all compliance-related decisions, configurations, and testing. 5. Implement continuous monitoring and regular audits to ensure ongoing adherence to regulations. 6. Foster open communication between development teams, compliance officers, and legal counsel. Question 6. System analysis indicates that a development team is building a custom module with an IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. To manage lease agreements, which involves sensitive financial and tenant data. The team is under pressure to deliver the module quickly to meet business needs. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance without compromising the project timeline? Option A. Prioritize the development of core functional features of the lease management module, assuming that standard TRIRIGA security and auditing capabilities will inherently satisfy all relevant regulatory requirements for data handling and reporting. Option B. Focus on developing the module to meet the immediate business requirements and plan to address any potential regulatory compliance issues through post-development patches and updates as they are identified by internal audit or external regulators. Option C. Implement the custom module with minimal security controls, relying on the organization's IT security team to implement necessary compliance measures at the network level after the module is deployed. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of all applicable U.S. federal regulations pertaining to financial data privacy and reporting, and then meticulously map each regulatory requirement to specific functionalities, data fields, and audit trails within the proposed custom module before commencing development. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the development of core functional features of the lease management module, assuming that standard TRIRIGA security and auditing capabilities will inherently satisfy all relevant regulatory requirements for data handling and reporting. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulated environments, balancing the need for efficient system development with the imperative of adhering to strict regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. Development guidelines, which are implicitly tied to the overarching regulatory framework for the exam's jurisdiction, assumed to be U.S. federal regulations for financial services, given the context of application development in a regulated industry, though the exam itself doesn't specify a jurisdiction beyond the platform version. Developers must ensure that any custom solutions built on the platform do not inadvertently create vulnerabilities or non-compliance issues. The core of the challenge is to proactively identify and mitigate risks associated with data handling, access controls, and audit trails within the application, ensuring they align with established regulatory expectations for data integrity and security. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape and its implications for application development. By conducting a detailed review of existing regulations and mapping them to the specific functionalities and data flows within the TRIRIGA application, developers can proactively identify potential compliance gaps. This systematic approach ensures that custom development is not only functional, but also inherently compliant, minimizing the risk of future remediation efforts, fines, or reputational damage. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible development and a proactive stance on regulatory adherence, which is a cornerstone of professional integrity in regulated industries. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting functional requirements without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal and ethical obligations associated with developing software in a regulated sector. Such an approach risks creating applications that, while technically sound, violate data privacy laws, security standards, or reporting requirements. This can lead to significant financial penalties, legal liabilities, and a loss of trust from stakeholders and regulatory bodies. Another incorrect approach that relies on assumptions about regulatory compliance without explicit verification is equally problematic. Assumptions can be dangerous in a compliance-driven environment, without concrete evidence or documented validation that the developed features meet specific regulatory mandates, the application remains vulnerable to noncompliance. This demonstrates a lack of rigor and a failure to establish a robust compliance framework, which is essential for maintaining operational integrity and avoiding regulatory scrutiny. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a multi-stage approach. First, thoroughly understand the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the industry and the data being managed by the TRIRIGA application. Second, engage with compliance officers or legal counsel to clarify any ambiguities in the regulations. Third, meticulously document the mapping of TRIRIGA functionalities, both standard and custom, these regulatory requirements. Fourth, implement development practices that inherently support compliance, such as robust access controls, detailed audit logging, and secure data handling protocols. Finally, conduct regular audits and reviews to ensure ongoing adherence to both internal policies and external regulations. This structured decision-making process ensures that regulatory compliance is an integral part of the development lifecycle, not an afterthought. Question 7. The assessment process reveals that a development team has implemented several custom business objects and associated workflows within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. To manage lease agreements, including sensitive financial and tenant information. While the functionality is operational, a recent internal audit has flagged potential gaps in data security and audit trail completeness. Which of the following approaches best ensures ongoing regulatory compliance and professional integrity in this scenario? Option A. Prioritize the development of new features requested by stakeholders, deferring any detailed review of existing custom objects and workflows until a future, less critical development cycle. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of all custom objects and workflows against relevant data privacy and security guidelines, implementing necessary validation rules, and enhancing audit logging mechanisms to capture all critical data modifications and access events. Option C. Implement a basic data masking solution for all sensitive fields within the custom objects, without a thorough analysis of the specific regulatory requirements for data access and retention. Option D. Rely on the default security settings of the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. Assuming that the platform's inherent architecture is sufficient to meet all regulatory requirements for data handling. Correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of all custom objects and workflows against relevant data privacy and security guidelines, implementing necessary validation rules, and enhancing audit logging mechanisms to capture all critical data modifications and access events. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in application development, balancing the need for rapid deployment with the imperative of regulatory compliance. In the context of IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. This translates to ensuring that custom configurations and extensions adhere to established data privacy and security standards, particularly when handling sensitive facility management or financial data. The professional challenge lies in the potential for developers, under pressure to deliver features, to overlook or misinterpret regulatory requirements, leading to noncompliance. The correct approach emphasizes proactive integration of regulatory checks throughout the development lifecycle. This aligns with best professional practice by embedding compliance as a core development tenet, rather than an afterthought. Specifically, it involves leveraging TRIRIGA built-in validation tools and adhering to IBM's recommended security configurations for data handling. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of costly remediation and reputational damage. Regulatory frameworks, while not explicitly detailed in the exam syllabus beyond the platform's context, implicitly demand that applications handling data must do so securely and in accordance with general principles of data protection and integrity. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thorough validation would be professionally unacceptable. This could involve deploying custom objects or workflows without rigorous testing against potential data exposure vulnerabilities, or without confirming adherence to data retention policies. Such an approach represents a direct failure to uphold the implicit regulatory obligation to protect data and maintain system integrity. Another incorrect approach might be to assume that standard TRIRIGA configurations are inherently compliant for all use cases, neglecting the specific data types and access controls required by the deployed solution. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to understand the nuanced application of regulatory principle to specific business processes. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment at each stage of development. Developers must ask, what are the potential regulatory implications of this change? This includes considering data privacy, security, auditability, and data integrity. When in doubt, consulting with compliance officers or legal counsel, and thoroughly reviewing IBM's documentation on security and best practices for TRIRIGA is paramount. The goal is to build compliance into the design, not to bolt it on later. Question 8. The monitoring system demonstrates a comprehensive collection of all user interaction data within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. One development environment, including timestamps, IP addresses, and specific field-level changes made by each user. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance requirements for application development and data handling? Option A. Deploy the monitoring system with default settings, relying on the vendor's general compliance statements without specific validation against the applicable regulatory framework for IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. One development. Option B. Implement a data minimization strategy for monitoring, collecting only the data essential for identifying performance bottlenecks and security anomalies, and ensure all collected data is anonymized or pseudonymized where possible, with clear retention policies aligned with regulatory mandates. Option C. Configure the monitoring system to capture all available data points without initial filtering, assuming that future regulatory changes will dictate which data needs to be retained or purged. Option D. Focus solely on capturing user activity logs for audit purposes, disregarding other system performance metrics that might be collected by the monitoring system, as long as the audit logs are compliant. The correct answer is B. Implement a data minimization strategy for monitoring, collecting only the data essential for identifying performance bottlenecks and security anomalies, and ensure all collected data is anonymized or pseudonymized where possible, with clear retention policies aligned with regulatory mandates. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for robust application monitoring with the strict adherence to regulatory compliance frameworks, specifically within the context of IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. One development. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that monitoring activities do not inadvertently violate data privacy regulations or introduce security vulnerabilities, which are paramount in regulated industries. Developers must proactively identify and mitigate risks associated with data collection, storage, and access during the monitoring process. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a risk-based methodology aligned with regulatory expectations. By conducting a thorough impact assessment and implementing controls that minimize data exposure and ensure compliance with data handling policies, developers demonstrate due diligence. This proactive stance ensures that monitoring serves its intended purpose of system integrity and performance without compromising sensitive information or violating established legal and ethical standards. It reflects a commitment to responsible development and data stewardship. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on comprehensive data capture without considering its regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of understanding or disregard for data privacy laws and industry-specific regulations. Such an approach risks unauthorized access to sensitive information, leading to potential data breaches, significant financial penalties, and severe reputational damage. It also violates the ethical obligation to protect user data. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing monitoring without proper authorization or documentation is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of adherence to internal governance policies and potentially external regulatory requirements for system changes and data access. It creates an audit trail deficiency, making it difficult to prove compliance and potentially leading to findings of noncompliance during regulatory reviews. This approach undermines transparency and accountability. A third incorrect approach that relies on generic, nonspecific monitoring tools without validating their compliance with the specific regulatory framework applicable to the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. One development environment is professionally unsound. This oversight can lead to the use of tools that do not meet the required security standards or data handling protocols, thereby introducing compliance gaps and potential vulnerabilities. It signifies a failure to perform adequate due diligence in selecting and implementing critical development tools. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the regulatory landscape. Thoroughly research and comprehend all applicable regulations and guidelines relevant to the development and deployment of the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. 2. Identify potential risks. Proactively identify all potential risks associated with monitoring activities, including data privacy, security, and compliance. 3. Assess impact. Evaluate the potential impact of these risks on the organization and its stakeholders. 4. Develop mitigation strategies. Design and implement controls and procedures to mitigate identified risks. 5. Document and validate. Ensure all monitoring strategies and implemented controls are thoroughly documented and validated against regulatory requirements. 6. Seek expert advice. Consult with legal, compliance, and security experts when uncertainties arise. 7. Continuous review. Regularly review and update monitoring strategies to adapt to evolving regulations and threats. Question 9. The risk matrix shows a moderate risk associated with the deployment of a new custom module in the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. Specifically concerning potential data segregation issues. Which of the following actions best addresses this identified risk in a manner compliant with the regulatory framework for this platform? Option A. Proceed with the deployment of the custom module after a thorough internal technical review by the development team, assuming the platform's inherent security features will adequately segregate data. Option B. Deploy the custom module with a temporary disclaimer acknowledging potential data segregation concerns, with a plan to address them in a future patch if issues arise. Option C. Implement the custom module and rely on user training to mitigate any potential data segregation risks, assuming users will adhere to best practices. Option D. Immediately halt the deployment and initiate a formal review process involving the compliance team and security architects to assess the data segregation capabilities of the custom module against the platform's regulatory guidelines before any further action is taken. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the deployment of the custom module after a thorough internal technical review by the development team, assuming the platform's inherent security features will adequately segregate data. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient application development with the imperative of adhering to regulatory compliance, specifically within the context of IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. The core tension lies in potential shortcuts or deviations from established development and deployment processes that might be perceived as faster but could introduce significant compliance risks. The risk matrix implies a proactive identification of potential issues, and the challenge is to translate this identified risk into concrete, compliant action. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified risks through a structured, documented, and auditable process. By involving the compliance team and ensuring that all changes are reviewed against the regulatory framework for the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. The organization demonstrates a commitment to due diligence. This proactive engagement ensures that development activities do not inadvertently violate any specific regulatory requirements or internal governance policies related to data handling, security, or system integrity, which are paramount in regulated environments. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over compliance would fail by neglecting the established regulatory framework. For instance, bypassing the compliance team's review could lead to the implementation of features or configurations that, while functional, do not meet specific data privacy or security mandates applicable to the platform's use. This constitutes a regulatory failure because it bypasses a critical control point designed to ensure adherence to the specified regulatory framework. Another incorrect approach might involve making assumptions about compliance without explicit verification. This is an ethical failure, as it demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility to ensure the integrity and compliance of the developed application, potentially exposing the organization to legal penalties and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the identified risks from the risk matrix. This understanding should then be mapped against the specific regulatory requirements relevant to the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. The next step involves consulting with relevant stakeholders, such as the compliance team, to validate proposed solutions. Any development or deployment activity must be documented and traceable, demonstrating that compliance considerations were integrated throughout the lifecycle. When faced with a choice between speed and compliance, the professional decision-making process dictates that compliance must always take precedence, with efforts focused on finding compliant ways to achieve the desired speed or efficiency. Question 10. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to integrating new functionalities within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. Particularly when dealing with sensitive data. When introducing a new data analytics module, what is the most prudent course of action to ensure adherence to all relevant regulatory frameworks and internal governance policies? Option A. Prioritize the technical implementation and user adoption of the new module, deferring any formal compliance review until after the initial rollout to avoid delaying the project timeline. Option B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of the new module against all applicable regulatory requirements and internal compliance policies involving relevant stakeholders, and document all findings and mitigation strategies before deployment. Option C. Proceed with the integration of the new module, assuming that its vendor-provided documentation implicitly covers all necessary compliance aspects, and address any compliance concerns that may arise post-implementation. Option D. Implement the new module and rely on the IT security team to perform a retroactive compliance audit to identify and rectify any potential regulatory gaps after the system is live. Correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of the new module against all applicable regulatory requirements and internal compliance policies involving relevant stakeholders, and document all findings and mitigation strategies before deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulated environments where the implementation of new application features must align with existing compliance frameworks. The professional is tasked with integrating a new data analytics module into IBM TRIRIGA, which inherently involves handling sensitive financial and operational data. The challenge lies in ensuring that this integration does not inadvertently create new compliance risks or violate established data privacy and security regulations relevant to the exam's jurisdiction. The need for careful judgment stems from the potential for significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruption if compliance is compromised. The pressure to deliver new functionality quickly can sometimes conflict with the meticulous due diligence required for regulatory adherence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic assessment of the new module's impact on existing compliance controls and regulatory obligations. This includes a thorough review of the module's data handling processes, security features, and audit trails against the specific requirements of the C2010-597 IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. Application development context, which implies adherence to relevant data governance and application security standards. Engaging with compliance and legal teams early in the development lifecycle ensures that potential issues are identified and addressed before deployment. Documenting this assessment and the mitigation strategies implemented provides a clear audit trail, demonstrating due diligence and adherence to regulatory expectations. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes risk mitigation and ensures that technological advancements are implemented responsibly within the established legal and ethical boundaries. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new module without a formal compliance review and risk assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach demonstrates a disregard for established data protection and application security mandates, potentially leading to breaches of confidentiality, integrity, or availability of sensitive data. It bypasses critical control points designed to prevent noncompliance, exposing the organization to legal repercussions and reputational harm. Deploying the module based solely on vendor assurances without independent verification of its compliance capabilities is another failure. While vendor claims are important, the ultimate responsibility for regulatory compliance rests with the implementing organization. Relying solely on external claims without internal due diligence can lead to overlooking specific nuances of the organization's operating environment or the precise interpretation of applicable regulations. Focusing exclusively on the technical functionality of the module, assuming that compliance will be an afterthought or handled by other departments, is also professionally unacceptable. This siloed approach neglects the interconnectedness of technical implementation and regulatory requirements. Compliance is not a separate task, but an integral part of the development and deployment process, requiring cross-functional collaboration and integrated risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to regulatory compliance in application development. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the data being processed and the industry. 2. Identifying potential compliance risks associated with new features or system changes. 3. Implementing controls and processes to mitigate these risks. 4. Documenting all compliance-related activities and decisions. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating compliance measures as regulations or technology evolve. In situations involving new application modules, a critical step is to integrate compliance assessment into the project lifecycle from the outset, rather than treating it as a post-implementation check. This proactive stance ensures that compliance is built into the solution, not bolted on afterward, fostering a culture of responsible innovation. Question 11. The efficiency study reveals that a proposed modification to the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. One could significantly reduce data processing times. However, the study does not explicitly address whether this modification aligns with the regulatory framework and guidelines specified for the C2010-597 IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. One application development exam. Which of the following actions best ensures adherence to the regulatory requirements? Option A. Implement the modification and then initiate a post-implementation audit to verify compliance with the regulatory framework. Option B. Seek informal guidance from colleagues who have experience with similar modifications to gauge their perceived compliance with the regulatory framework. Option C. Proceed with the modification as planned, assuming that efficiency improvements are inherently compliant unless explicitly prohibited by the regulatory framework. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed modification against the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for the C2010-597 exam to ensure compliance before implementation. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the modification as planned, assuming that efficiency improvements are inherently compliant unless explicitly prohibited by the regulatory framework. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient system development with the imperative of adhering to regulatory compliance, specifically within the context of IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. Development. The core tension lies in ensuring that any modifications or enhancements to the platform, even those aimed at improving performance or user experience, do not inadvertently introduce risks or violate established regulatory frameworks. The efficiency study itself, while seemingly beneficial, could lead to shortcuts or deviations from documented processes if not managed with a strong understanding of compliance requirements. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough review and validation of proposed changes against the established regulatory framework for the C2010-597 exam. This ensures that all development activities are conducted in a manner that is compliant, auditable, and minimizes risk. By integrating compliance checks early and continuously, developers can proactively identify and mitigate potential issues, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the application and the organization's adherence to regulatory standards. This aligns with the principle of compliance by design, where regulatory considerations are embedded into the development lifecycle from the outset. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical implementation of the efficiency study's recommendations, without a formal compliance review, would represent a significant regulatory failure. This is because it bypasses the necessary checks and balances designed to ensure that the platform remains compliant with the specific regulations governing its use and development under the C2010-597 exams jurisdiction. Such an approach risks introducing non-compliant features or processes, leading to potential audit failures, penalties, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which involves implementing changes based on informal discussions or assumptions about regulatory requirements, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the structured and documented nature of regulatory compliance. Relying on informal communication for critical compliance decisions can lead to misinterpretations, omissions, and ultimately noncompliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the objective. Clearly define the goals of the efficiency study and the proposed changes. 2. Identify relevant regulations. Determine which specific regulatory frameworks, laws, and guidelines apply to the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. Development under the C2010-597 exams jurisdiction. 3. Assess impact. Evaluate how the proposed changes might affect existing compliance controls and processes. 4. Consult compliance experts. Engage with internal or external compliance officers or legal counsel to validate the proposed approach. 5. Document everything. Maintain detailed records of all decisions, reviews, and validations related to compliance. 6. Implement with oversight. Ensure that development and deployment are conducted under appropriate supervision and with ongoing compliance monitoring. Question 12. Assessment of the most appropriate methodology for evaluating the potential negative consequences of introducing a new custom workflow module into an existing IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. Environment, considering its impact on data integrity and system performance. Option A. An immediate deployment of the new module with post-implementation monitoring for any obvious issues. Option B. An assessment prioritizing only the technical compatibility of the new module with the TRIRIGA platform's core architecture. Option C. A review focused solely on the functional requirements and expected benefits of the new workflow module. Option D. A comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential threats, analyzes their likelihood and impact, and outlines mitigation strategies. The correct answer is D. A comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential threats, analyzes their likelihood and impact, and outlines mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in assessing the risk associated with a new feature deployment within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. The challenge lies in balancing the potential benefits of the new functionality against the inherent risks of introducing changes to a live system. A thorough risk assessment is crucial to prevent disruptions to business operations, data integrity issues, and potential security vulnerabilities. The complexity arises from understanding the interdependencies within the TRIRIGA platform and how the new feature might impact existing configurations, workflows, and user access. A rushed or incomplete assessment could lead to unforeseen consequences, impacting user adoption, system performance, and compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive risk assessment that considers multiple facets of the new feature's integration. This includes identifying potential threats, e.g., bugs, performance degradation, security exploits, analyzing their likelihood and impact, and then developing mitigation strategies. This aligns with best practices in application development and deployment, emphasizing proactive identification and management of risks. For IBM TRIRIGA, this would involve understanding how the new feature interacts with existing modules, data models, and security configurations. A structured approach ensures that all potential risks are considered, documented, and addressed before deployment, thereby safeguarding the stability and integrity of the application. This methodical process is essential for maintaining operational continuity and meeting any implicit or explicit regulatory requirements related to system stability and data security within the context of application development. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on the functional benefits of the new feature without a corresponding risk evaluation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Prioritizes expediency over system integrity and user safety, potentially leading to data corruption, unauthorized access, or system downtime, which could have compliance implications if data privacy or operational continuity are mandated. Prioritizing only the technical feasibility of the new feature, such as its compatibility with the TRIRIGA platform's core architecture, while neglecting the operational impact on end users and business processes, is also professionally unsound. This oversight can lead to user frustration, reduced productivity, and a failure to realize the intended business value, indirectly impacting compliance with operational efficiency standards. Implementing the new feature without any form of testing or validation, assuming it will function as intended, represents a severe breach of professional responsibility and a direct violation of standard development lifecycle practices. This approach courts disaster, risking critical system failures, data loss, and security breaches, all of which carry significant regulatory and financial repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to application development and deployment. This involves establishing a clear process for identifying, analyzing, evaluating, and treating risks at each stage of the development lifecycle. For new feature deployments in IBM TRIRIGA, this means 1. Initiating risk identification early in the design phase. 2. Conducting thorough impact analysis considering technical, operational, and security aspects. 3. Developing a risk mitigation plan including testing, rollback procedures, and user training. 4. Obtaining stakeholder approval based on the risk assessment. 5. Monitoring the system post-deployment to identify and address any emergent risks. This structured decision-making process ensures that changes are implemented responsibly, minimizing potential negative impacts and maximizing the likelihood of successful adoption and sustained system performance. Question 13. Comparative studies suggest that integrating risk assessment into the IBM TRIRIGA application platform development lifecycle is crucial for maintaining system integrity and regulatory compliance. Which of the following approaches best embodies a proactive and effective risk management strategy within this context? Option A. Conducting a single, comprehensive risk assessment during the initial project planning phase and relying on ad hoc identification of new risks by individual team members. Option B. Prioritizing feature development over risk mitigation activities, addressing identified risks only when they directly impede project timelines or cause critical system failures. Option C. Embedding continuous risk identification, assessment, and mitigation planning into all phases of the TRIRIGA application development lifecycle, with regular reviews and integrated action items. Option D. Establishing a dedicated, independent risk assessment team that provides reports to the development team without direct integration into the development workflow. The correct answer is A. Conducting a single, comprehensive risk assessment during the initial project planning phase and relying on ad hoc identification of new risks by individual team members. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in a regulated environment where the IBM TRIRIGA application platform is being developed. The core challenge lies in effectively integrating risk assessment into the development lifecycle without compromising regulatory compliance or introducing undue project delays. Developers must balance the need for thorough risk identification and mitigation with the practical constraints of project timelines and resource allocation. The complexity arises from the potential for unforeseen risks to impact system functionality, data integrity, or adherence to specific industry regulations, which could lead to significant financial penalties or reputational damage. The pressure to deliver a functional application quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts in risk assessment, making it a critical area for professional judgment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively embedding risk assessment throughout the TRIRIGA application development lifecycle, from initial design to deployment and ongoing maintenance. This aligns with best practices in software development and regulatory expectations for robust systems. Specifically, this means conducting regular risk identification workshops, documenting identified risks, assessing their potential impact and likelihood, and developing appropriate mitigation strategies. These strategies should be integrated into the development backlog and prioritized alongside feature development. This proactive and iterative approach ensures that risks are managed as they emerge, rather than being addressed reactively when they have already caused problems. This methodology is crucial for maintaining system integrity, ensuring data security, and complying with any applicable industry-specific regulations that govern the use of such platforms. It demonstrates a commitment to quality and due diligence, which are paramount in a regulated context. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to conduct a single, comprehensive risk assessment only at the very beginning of the project. This is insufficient because risks evolve throughout the development lifecycle. New risks can emerge due to design changes, integration challenges, or evolving regulatory landscapes. Failing to reassess risks periodically means that potential issues might go unnoticed and unaddressed until they become critical problems, leading to potential noncompliance and system failures. Another incorrect approach is to delegate risk assessment solely to a separate, non-development team without close collaboration. While specialized risk teams can provide valuable expertise, a lack of integration with the development team can lead to a disconnect between identified risks and practical mitigation strategies. Developers might not fully understand the implications of a risk, or mitigation efforts might be impractical to implement within the development context. This siloed approach hinders effective risk management and can result in overlooked or poorly implemented controls, potentially violating regulatory requirements for system oversight. A third incorrect approach is to treat risk assessment as a purely documentation-heavy exercise with no actionable outcomes. Simply creating risk registers without actively planning, implementing, and monitoring mitigation strategies is a failure to manage risk effectively. Regulatory bodies expect demonstrable actions to address identified risks, not just theoretical acknowledgement. This approach creates a false sense of security while leaving the application vulnerable to actual threats, which is a direct contravention of due diligence expected in regulated environments. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-aware mindset throughout the entire TRIRIGA application development process. This involves establishing clear processes for risk identification, assessment, and mitigation that are integrated into daily development activities. Regular team discussions, incorporating risk review into sprint planning and retrospectives, and ensuring that mitigation tasks are treated with the same priority as feature development are key. When faced with potential risks, professionals should always ask, what is the potential impact on system integrity, data security, and regulatory compliance? And what are the most effective and practical steps to mitigate this risk, and how can we track their implementation? This proactive, integrated, and action-oriented approach ensures that the developed application is not only functional but also secure, compliant, and resilient. Question 14. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a security vulnerability being exploited in a non-critical module of the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. With a high potential impact on data integrity if exploited. What is the most appropriate next step for the application development team? Option A. Implement a temporary workaround for the vulnerability without undertaking a full code fix, and defer any permanent solution to a future major system upgrade. Option B. Document the vulnerability and assign it a low priority for remediation, as it is in a non-critical module and the likelihood of exploitation is only moderate. Option C. Immediately halt all ongoing development activities to focus exclusively on patching the identified vulnerability, regardless of its impact on project timelines. Option D. Develop a phased remediation plan that prioritizes addressing the vulnerability in the non-critical module, considering potential workarounds and the impact on other modules, while continuing with planned development for critical functionalities. The correct answer is D. Develop a phased remediation plan that prioritizes addressing the vulnerability in the non-critical module, considering potential workarounds and the impact on other modules, while continuing with planned development for critical functionalities. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for system functionality with the long-term implications of security vulnerabilities. The IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. Like any enterprise software, is subject to evolving security threats. A risk assessment is crucial to prioritize remediation efforts effectively. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate response when an identified risk, while not immediately exploitable, could have significant consequences if exploited. This requires a nuanced understanding of risk appetite, resource constraints, and the potential impact on business operations and data integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with a proactive and systematic risk management strategy. By prioritizing the identified vulnerability based on its potential impact and likelihood of exploitation, and then developing a phased remediation plan that considers business continuity and resource allocation, the team demonstrates due diligence. This approach ensures that critical systems remain operational, while addressing security weaknesses in a controlled and effective manner, adhering to general principles of IT governance and security best practices that would be expected in any regulated environment where IBM TRIRIGA might be deployed. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, low-impact fixes fails to address the underlying systemic risk. This could lead to a false sense of security while a more significant threat festers. Ethically, this is a failure to adequately protect the organization's assets and data. Another incorrect approach that halts all development to immediately fix the vulnerability without a thorough impact analysis could cause significant business disruption and is an inefficient use of resources. This demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and an overreaction to a single risk without considering the broader operational context. A third incorrect approach that ignores the vulnerability due to perceived low immediate likelihood without a plan for future monitoring or mitigation is negligent. This neglects the responsibility to maintain a secure environment and could expose the organization to future breaches, violating professional obligations to safeguard information systems. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves 1. Accurately identifying and assessing risks using a standardized methodology, like a risk matrix. 2. Evaluating the potential impact and likelihood of each risk. 3. Considering the organization's risk appetite and tolerance. 4. Developing a prioritized remediation plan that balances security needs with business objectives. And 5. Establishing a process for ongoing monitoring and review of risks. Question 15. To address the challenge of ensuring the security and stability of a newly developed IBM TRIRIGA application, what is the most effective approach to proactively identify and manage potential risks throughout the development lifecycle? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving key stakeholders, leveraging historical project data and industry best practices to identify, analyze, and prioritize potential threats and vulnerabilities. Option B. Rely on the personal experience and intuition of the lead developer to identify and mitigate any perceived risks as they emerge. Option C. Delegate the entire risk assessment process to a junior team member with minimal oversight to expedite the development timeline. Option D. Focus solely on addressing the most frequently reported issues from previous, unrelated projects, assuming similar problems will arise. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving key stakeholders, leveraging historical project data and industry best practices to identify, analyze, and prioritize potential threats and vulnerabilities. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent uncertainty in identifying and quantifying potential risks within a complex application development environment like IBM TRIRIGA. The challenge lies in moving beyond a superficial understanding of risks to a proactive and systematic approach that aligns with established risk management principles and regulatory expectations for application development. Careful judgment is required to prioritize risks, allocate resources effectively, and ensure that mitigation strategies are both practical and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a structured and documented process for risk assessment. This methodology ensures that potential threats to the application's integrity, security, and functionality are systematically identified, analyzed, and prioritized. By engaging stakeholders and leveraging historical data, this approach fosters a comprehensive understanding of the risk landscape. This aligns with the general principles of good governance and due diligence expected in software development, where a proactive stance on risk management is crucial for delivering reliable and secure solutions. While specific regulations for C 2010-597 are not provided, the underlying principle of a documented, systematic risk assessment is a universally accepted best practice in IT development and project management, aiming to prevent issues before they impact the business. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, high-profile issues without a broader assessment fails to address potential systemic vulnerabilities. This can lead to overlooking critical, albeit less obvious, risks that could have significant long-term consequences. Ethically, this approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a reactive rather than proactive stance, potentially exposing the organization to unforeseen liabilities. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or individual opinions without a structured framework lacks objectivity and can lead to biased risk identification. This can result in misallocation of resources, focusing on perceived threats rather than actual ones. It may not satisfy any potential audit or compliance requirements that necessitate a demonstrable risk assessment process. A third incorrect approach that delegates risk assessment entirely to a single individual without broader consultation or oversight can lead to a narrow perspective and potential blind spots. This individual may lack the diverse knowledge base required to identify all relevant risks across different functional areas of the application. Professionally, this is a failure of collaboration and can result in an incomplete or inaccurate risk profile, potentially leading to inadequate mitigation strategies. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing a clear risk management framework, defining roles and responsibilities, and ensuring that the risk assessment process is iterative and integrated into the development lifecycle. This includes actively seeking input from all relevant stakeholders, documenting the assessment process and findings, and regularly reviewing and updating the risk register as the project evolves. Question 16. The risk matrix shows several high-priority risks related to data integrity and system performance within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. Which of the following development approaches best addresses these risks while adhering to professional development standards? Option A. Immediately begin developing new features that have been requested by users, as this will demonstrate progress and potentially distract from the identified risks. Option B. Focus on addressing the risks that are easiest to implement solutions for, regardless of their priority level, to quickly show progress in risk reduction. Option C. Assign the task of risk mitigation to the development team without further consultation with business stakeholders, assuming they understand the technical implications best. Option D. Develop specific, actionable mitigation strategies for each high-priority risk, prioritizing those with the highest impact and likelihood, and integrate these into the development backlog with clear ownership and timelines. The correct answer is D. Develop specific, actionable mitigation strategies for each high-priority risk, prioritizing those with the highest impact and likelihood, and integrate these into the development backlog with clear ownership and timelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent subjectivity in risk assessment and the need to align technical implementation with business objectives and regulatory compliance within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. 1. The core difficulty lies in translating a qualitative risk matrix into actionable development decisions that are both effective and compliant. Professionals must balance the urgency indicated by high-risk ratings with the practicalities of development timelines, resource allocation, and the specific requirements of the TRIRIGA platform. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented process for risk mitigation that directly addresses the identified high-priority risks. By focusing on the highest-rated risks and developing specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, smart mitigation strategies, the development team ensures that critical vulnerabilities are addressed first. This aligns with general principles of good governance and responsible software development, aiming to prevent potential negative impacts on the business and maintain system integrity. Within the context of IBM TRIRIGA application platform development, this methodical approach ensures that compliance requirements, if any are implied by the risk assessment, are also considered and addressed proactively. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the most visually prominent risks, without a clear mitigation plan, fails to provide a structured path to resolution. This can lead to wasted effort on less critical issues or a superficial understanding of the problem, potentially leaving high-impact risks unaddressed. Ethically, this could be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence in protecting the application and its users from harm. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes development speed over risk mitigation overlooks the potential long-term consequences of unaddressed risks. This can result in technical debt, security vulnerabilities, or functional failures that are more costly and difficult to fix later. From a regulatory perspective, if the risks identified have compliance implications, this approach could lead to non-compliance, exposing the organization to penalties and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach that delegates risk mitigation solely to the development team without business stakeholder input risks, misinterpreting the true business impact of the identified risks. This can lead to the development of mitigation strategies that are technically sound, but do not adequately address the business's concerns or priorities. Professionally, this demonstrates a lack of collaboration and a failure to integrate technical solutions with business needs, which is crucial for successful application development. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the risk matrix, followed by a collaborative session with business stakeholders to prioritize risks based on their potential impact and likelihood. Once prioritized, specific mitigation strategies should be defined, assigned ownership, and tracked. This process should be iterative, with regular reviews to ensure that mitigation efforts are effective and that new risks are identified and addressed. Question 17. The assessment process reveals that a critical custom module for managing lease obligations with an IBM TRIRIGA application platform V3.2.1 is nearing completion. However, preliminary reviews suggest potential performance bottlenecks due to complex data retrieval logic and a lack of comprehensive error handling for external data integrations. Which of the following approaches best addresses the identified risks to ensure a robust and reliable application deployment? Option A. Focus solely on the functional requirements of the custom module, as performance and integration risks are considered secondary to delivering the core business functionality on time. Option B. Immediately deploy the module and address any performance or integration issues as they arise in the production environment, prioritizing critical bug fixes. Option C. Defer the risk assessment to a later phase of the project, assuming that any issues will be minor and can be resolved quickly by the development team during post-deployment support. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment focusing on the potential impact of performance degradation and integration failures on business operations, and develop a detailed mitigation plan before proceeding with deployment. The correct answer is B. Immediately deploy the module and address any performance or integration issues as they arise in the production environment, prioritizing critical bug fixes. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in application development, balancing the need for robust risk assessment with the practical constraints of project timelines and resource availability. In the context of IBM TRIRIGA application platform V3.2.1, a critical aspect of development is ensuring that any custom solutions or configurations do not introduce vulnerabilities or negatively impact system performance and data integrity. The professional challenge lies in identifying, analyzing, and mitigating potential risks without unduly delaying the project or incurring excessive costs. This requires a nuanced understanding of the TRIRIGA platform's architecture, potential integration points, and the specific business processes being supported. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and integrated risk assessment methodology. This involves identifying potential risks early in the development lifecycle, prioritizing them based on their likelihood and impact, and developing appropriate mitigation strategies. For IBM TRIRIGA, this might include assessing the security implications of custom workflows, the performance impact of complex queries, or the data integrity risks associated with data imports or integrations. Adhering to established development best practices and any applicable IBM guidelines for TRIRIGA development ensures that the application remains stable, secure, and compliant with business requirements. This approach represents best professional practice because it minimizes the likelihood of costly rework, security breaches, or operational disruption, thereby safeguarding the integrity and value of the TRIRIGA implementation. An incorrect approach might involve a superficial or reactive risk assessment. For instance, conducting a risk assessment only after a significant issue has already manifested would be a failure to proactively manage risks. This reactive stance can lead to emergency fixes, which are often more expensive and less effective than planned mitigation. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore potential risks due to perceived time pressures. This demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and can expose the organization to significant financial and reputational damage. Furthermore, failing to document the risk assessment process and mitigation strategies would hinder future audits, knowledge transfer, and continuous improvement efforts, representing a failure in professional diligence and transparency. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This framework should include steps for risk identification, risk analysis, including likelihood and impact assessment, risk evaluation, prioritization, risk treatment, mitigation, avoidance, transfer, or acceptance, and risk monitoring and review. In the context of IBM TRIRIGA development, this process should be integrated into the overall project management methodology, with clear roles and responsibilities assigned for risk management activities. Regular communication with stakeholders regarding identified risks and mitigation plans is also crucial for informed decision-making and to ensure alignment with business objectives. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that a TRIRIGA application development team is facing pressure to accelerate delivery timelines. The project manager is considering streamlining the risk assessment process to save time. Which of the following approaches to risk assessment would be most professionally sound and compliant with general principles of due diligence in application development? Option A. Prioritize risks based solely on the perceived urgency of immediate development tasks, deferring any risks that do not directly impede current coding activities. Option B. Rely on the subjective opinions of the most experienced developers to identify and prioritize potential risks, assuming their intuition will cover most critical areas. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving all stakeholders, leveraging historical project data and industry best practices, and establish a clear process for ongoing risk monitoring and reevaluation throughout the development lifecycle. Option D. Perform a brief, initial risk assessment focusing only on technical coding errors, and then assume no new risks will emerge as the project progresses. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving all stakeholders, leveraging historical project data and industry best practices, and establish a clear process for ongoing risk monitoring and reevaluation throughout the development lifecycle. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in application development, balancing the need for robust risk assessment with the practical constraints of project timelines and resource availability. The professional challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing risks effectively without succumbing to analysis paralysis or superficial evaluations. The IBM TRIRIGA application platform V3.2.1 context implies a need for understanding how application-specific risks, such as data integrity, security vulnerabilities, and integration complexities, can impact business operations and compliance. The absence of a clearly defined risk appetite from senior management adds another layer of complexity, requiring the development team to make informed judgments based on industry best practices and potential consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and iterative process of risk identification, analysis, and response planning, tailored to the specific context of the TRIRIGA application development. This aligns with general principles of good project management and software development lifecycle best practices, which are implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate due diligence and risk mitigation. Specifically, a structured approach that involves engaging stakeholders, leveraging historical data, if available, and considering the likelihood and impact of identified risks ensures that resources are focused on the most critical areas. This proactive stance helps prevent costly rework, security breaches, or compliance failures, thereby safeguarding the organization's assets and reputation. The emphasis on documenting the risk assessment process and the rationale behind prioritization is crucial for auditability and continuous improvement, reflecting a commitment to regulatory compliance and sound governance. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely rely on the most vocal team members' opinions for risk identification. This is professionally unacceptable because it introduces bias and overlooks potential risks that may not be immediately apparent or championed by a few individuals. It fails to meet the due diligence expected in risk management, potentially leading to the omission of critical threats that could have significant regulatory or business implications. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a one-time, superficial risk assessment at the beginning of the project and then disregard it. This is professionally unsound, as risks are dynamic and can emerge or change throughout the development lifecycle. A static risk assessment fails to adapt to evolving threats or project changes, leaving the project vulnerable to unforeseen issues. This lack of ongoing vigilance can result in non-compliance with evolving regulatory requirements or a failure to address emerging security vulnerabilities. A third incorrect approach is to focus exclusively on technical risks and ignore business or operational risks. This is a critical failure in risk management. While technical risks are important in application development, business and operational risks, e.g., User adoption, process disruption, data privacy implications can have a far greater impact on the success of the TRIRIGA implementation and its alignment with business objectives. Ignoring these broader risks can lead to a technically sound application that fails to deliver business value or inadvertently creates compliance issues. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach that is integrated into the entire development lifecycle. This involves 1. Establishing a clear understanding of the project's objectives and the organization's risk appetite, or making reasoned assumptions if not explicitly defined. 2. Employing a structured methodology for risk identification, such as brainstorming sessions with diverse team members, reviewing past project lessons learned, and analyzing system requirements for potential vulnerabilities. 3. Quantifying or qualitatively assessing the likelihood and impact of identified risks. 4. Prioritizing risks based on their potential severity and the organization's tolerance. 5. Developing and implementing appropriate risk response strategies, mitigation, avoidance, transfer, acceptance. 6. Continuously monitoring and reviewing risks throughout the project, updating the assessment as necessary. 7. Documenting the entire process for transparency, accountability, and future reference. This systematic and iterative process ensures that risks are managed proactively and effectively, aligning with professional standards and regulatory expectations for due diligence and responsible development. Question 19. Consider a scenario where a development team is tasked with creating a new module within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3. 2. One that requires users to input specific financial data. To ensure the accuracy and integrity of this data, the team must implement a robust validation mechanism. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for application development within this framework? Option A. Implement only basic server-side checks for the presence of data without considering data types, formats, or user-friendly feedback mechanisms. Option B. Rely exclusively on client-side JavaScript validation, assuming users will adhere to input requirements and that server-side checks are redundant. Option C. Implement comprehensive validation logic on both the client side for immediate user feedback and on the server side as a final safeguard against invalid data submission. Option D. Develop the module without any explicit data validation, trusting that users will naturally input accurate and complete information. Correct answer is C. Implement comprehensive validation logic on both the client side for immediate user feedback and on the server side as a final safeguard against invalid data submission. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for efficient application development with the imperative of maintaining data integrity and security, as mandated by IBM TRIRIGA Application Platform v3. 2. 1. Development guidelines. The core of the challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate method for handling data validation during the development of a new module, ensuring that the chosen approach aligns with best practices for application stability and compliance. The correct approach emphasizes a layered validation strategy, incorporating both client-side and server-side checks. Client-side validation provides immediate feedback to the user, improving usability and reducing unnecessary server load. Server-side validation is crucial as the ultimate gatekeeper, ensuring data integrity regardless of user actions or potential circumvention of client-side checks. This layered approach is considered best professional practice because it directly addresses the reliability and security requirements inherent in application development. It minimizes the risk of corrupted data entering the system, which could lead to operational errors, reporting inaccuracies, and potential compliance breaches if sensitive data is compromised or misrepresented. Adhering to these principles ensures the application functions as intended and maintains the trust of its users and stakeholders. An incorrect approach that relies solely on client-side validation fails to meet professional standards because it leaves the system vulnerable. Client-side scripts can be bypassed or manipulated, meaning that invalid data could still be submitted to the server. This creates a significant risk of data corruption and potential security vulnerabilities, which is a direct contravention of the implicit requirement for robust application development. Another incorrect approach that neglects validation entirely, assuming users will always input correct data, is professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a severe lack of foresight and a disregard for fundamental application development principles. It directly invites data integrity issues, system instability, and potential compliance failures, as the application would not be built to withstand expected user input variations. Finally, an approach that implements only basic, superficial server-side checks without considering user experience or the nuances of data types would also be considered professionally deficient. While it offers some protection, it fails to provide the user with timely feedback, leading to frustration and potentially more errors as users struggle to understand what is expected. This also misses opportunities to implement more sophisticated validation rules that could prevent a wider range of data anomalies. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a thorough understanding of the application's requirements, the potential risks associated with data input, and the capabilities of the IBM TRIRIGA application platform. Developers should prioritize solutions that offer a comprehensive balance of user experience, data integrity, and security, always referencing the platform's development guidelines and best practices to ensure a robust and compliant outcome. Question 20. The investigation demonstrates that a development team, under pressure to deliver new features for IBM TRIRIGA, has implemented a new data entry form with minimal client-side validation and no server-side business rule enforcement for critical asset management fields. This approach relies heavily on end users to input accurate information and assumes that any discrepancies will be caught during periodic data audits. Which of the following approaches best upholds professional best practices for data integrity and application reliability within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform v3? 2. 1. Option A. Implement comprehensive client-side validation for all input fields, server-side validation for critical business rules, and automated data integrity checks that trigger alerts for anomalies. Option B. Implement basic input masking for known data formats and rely on user training to ensure data accuracy. Option C. Focus solely on improving the user interface to make data entry more intuitive, assuming that user-friendliness will inherently reduce input errors. Option D. Defer all data validation to the end of the fiscal year during the annual data audit process to minimize development time for the current feature release. The correct answer is A. Implement comprehensive client-side validation for all input fields, server-side validation for critical business rules, and automated data integrity checks that trigger alerts for anomalies. Explanation: the investigation demonstrates a common challenge in application development, balancing the need for rapid feature deployment with the imperative of maintaining data integrity and security within the IBM TRIRIGA application platform. Developers often face pressure to implement new functionalities quickly, which can lead to shortcuts in validation and error handling. This scenario is professionally challenging because a failure to adhere to best practices in data validation can have significant downstream consequences, including inaccurate reporting, operational inefficiencies, and potential security vulnerabilities, all of which can impact an organization's ability to comply with its own internal policies and potentially external regulations related to data accuracy and privacy, depending on the nature of the data being managed. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multi-layered validation strategy that is integrated into the development lifecycle. This includes input validation at the point of data entry, business rule validation to ensure data conforms to organizational logic, and data integrity checks to maintain consistency across the TRIRIGA system. This approach represents best professional practice because it proactively prevents erroneous data from entering the system, thereby safeguarding the accuracy and reliability of information used for decision-making and operational management. It aligns with the principle of building quality into the application from the outset, reducing the cost and effort associated with fixing data issues later. Furthermore, robust validation contributes to a more secure and compliant application environment by minimizing the risk of data corruption or unauthorized manipulation. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on user diligence or to implement validation only at the reporting stage. Relying solely on user diligence is professionally unacceptable because it places an undue burden on end users and is prone to human error, leading to inconsistent data quality. It fails to provide the necessary technical safeguards. Implementing validation only at the reporting stage is also professionally deficient because it allows erroneous data to proliferate throughout the system, corrupting historical records and potentially impacting multiple business processes before it is identified. This reactive approach is inefficient and increases the risk of making decisions based on flawed information. Another incorrect approach would be to implement superficial validation checks that do not cover all critical data fields or business rules, leaving significant gaps in data integrity. This demonstrates a lack of thoroughness and a failure to anticipate potential data anomalies, which is a breach of professional responsibility in application development. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment of data criticality and potential impact of errors. Developers should prioritize validation efforts based on the sensitivity and importance of the data being managed within TRIRIGA. This includes understanding the business context and the downstream uses of the data. A proactive approach to identifying potential data anomalies and designing robust validation mechanisms should be a core part of the development methodology, rather than an afterthought. Collaboration with business stakeholders to define comprehensive validation rules is also crucial.